My name is Jim Rugg, and I am in the stacks at Third Eye Comics talking about some of my favorite graphic novels. I'm going to start with Dan Clowes' Death Ray. This was actually the last issue of his series Eightball, which produced half a dozen graphic novels easily, as well as many standalone great short stories. We could not find a copy of the complete Eightball because it recently sold. I'm sure they'll have it back in stock soon. The complete Eightball collects the first 21 or 22 issues of Eightball, all the stories, all the short strips that were never reprinted, as well as classics like Ghost World, Dan Pussy, the scathing indictment of the comics industry from the 90s, but also looking at the history of comics, alternative comics, mainstream comics. It's absolutely mind-blowing. I think Ghost World is one that's already known, so I don't mean to gloss over that. It's a masterpiece. It is Dan Clowes probably expanding his writing chops after the first graphic novel that ran through Eightball, which was Like a Velvet Glove Cast in Iron. This was sort of a stream of consciousness, often compared to David Lynch by reviewers at the time. But whenever he finished that one up, he kind of goes in a totally different direction with Ghost World, which starts out as a standalone short story and evolves into a graphic novel about kind of a coming of age, end of two high school girls who had been friends throughout school and basically outgrew that friendship as they enter adulthood. Amazing that those two books both come out of the same series, but it also produced Ice Haven, one of the greatest single comic book issues in the history of comics, as well as a number of other collections and graphic novels and short stories like Caricature. Maybe the greatest juxtaposition in the history of comics, from Dan Clowes' Eightball to Lobo. This is a giant collection of Lobo's ongoing series, but if you see this cover, this is actually the mini-series cover of issue 1 that launched Lobo, at least into my world, and that meant Simon Bisley. This was the first time I ever saw Simon Bisley's artwork. This first series, written by Alan Grant and Keith Giffen, who also did the layouts, was phenomenal. It was over the top, it was funny, and the star of the show was not actually Lobo, as I already said. It was Simon Bisley's magnificent artwork, although it's an outstanding series that I think continues to reside today as Lobo continues to find publication after all these years. It's because of the original miniseries that this is cover number 1 of. I have such a wide range of books here. It's ridiculous to go from Bisley to this one, Summer, by Gillian and Mariko Tamaki. This is a young adult graphic novel. I believe this is one of the best drawn comics I have ever seen. I can't recommend it enough. Gillian Tamaki is a world-class illustrator. Her and her cousin Mariko have collaborated on several graphic novels over the years, and these are just absolutely breathtaking in terms of Gillian's artistry. I should have flagged a perfect spread. However, this book is pretty much nothing but perfect spreads. So this one, Summer, an absolutely beautiful, both story and art, highly recommended. Barry Windsor-Smith's Weapon X. I recently wrote 25,000 words on this book for Bloomsbury's Marvel Age of Comics that'll be out in summer of 2026. Barry Windsor-Smith, I started out as a Wolverine fan. Second comic book I ever bought featured Wolverine. It was Wolverine number 10 by John Buscema and Bill Sienkiewicz. And I started following artists with that very early book. So I had been reading comics for maybe 2 years, and Wolverine always had great artists in those early years. Whenever I came across Barry Windsor-Smith's Weapon X, this is the origin of Wolverine, and it is demented, twisted, violent as you can imagine, and not violence like Arnold Schwarzenegger throwing a knife through somebody and telling them to stick around. This is violence like Deliverance, and Wolverine is the one squealing like a pig in it. Absolutely unbelievable as an origin story for a grade A character, but also one of the most beautiful comics I think Marvel has ever produced. Barry Windsor-Smith was the writer, penciler, inker, colorist, and co-letterer. And I say all of that because at the time, I was just reading Marvel comics pretty much. Marvel and DC, they had a team of people creating their books until I found Weapon X, and it was the work of one magnificent artist. Still stands out today, might be better read today than it was when it was published in the early 90s. Deals with conspiracy theory stuff. MK Ultra kind of is running underneath it. The setting is the early 60s, which is basically when the Marvel Universe is created. So concurrently with the Marvel Universe is the second wave of characters, the more violent anti-heroes, and this is the ultimate origin for that fallen age of comics that follows the Silver Age. Brian K. Vaughan's Spectators. This one is still in plastic, and probably for good reason. This is a bit of a challenging graphic novel. It's the most recent graphic novel that I read. I picked this up from Brian at Baltimore Comic-Con just a couple of weeks ago. Actually read it in my hotel room that night. I was so excited for it. It's fantastic. If you know Brian K. Vaughan's work, he has been a great writer for, geez, probably 25 years in comics alone. This is one of the examples of an actual graphic novel. So many graphic novels are collections of comic books, miniseries, maybe an ongoing story that features a 4, 6, 8-part story. This is a graphic novel in every sense of the word. I can't compare this to anything else that I have read or seen or watched. Totally unique in concept and execution. I absolutely love the rise of graphic novels because it allows creators to do works like this. Very unusual and very special, because I don't think this could exist in any format except for comics and graphic novels. And I should say a little bit about it if you're curious. Our main character dies in the beginning of the story. I don't think I'm spoiling anything because that happens in the first dozen pages or so. But she continues to live on and to observe humanity and possibly the end of humanity over many, many years in the setting of the story. And I'll leave it at that. Check this one out. It is full of surprises, at least based on my limited description. My last selection, and I'm so excited to talk about this book for a minute. This is Eleanor Davis, You and a Bike and a Road. This is a story by another cartoonist who I think of as one of my favorites, one of the best cartoonists that I know working in comics, Eleanor Davis. I would recommend any of her books or comics if you come across those, but this one in particular is very exciting. It's about a bike ride that she started from I can't remember if it's Arizona or New Mexico. It's been a couple of years since I've read this, but Fantagraphics has released a new hardcover edition of this. It was out of print for many years. Now it's back and available wherever you get good comics. But it's the story of her biking across the American Southwest, basically back to her home in Georgia from her parents in, I can't remember again, Arizona or New Mexico. But she chronicles this bike trip as she's going along. She rides during the day and then camps out at night, and she does drawings along the way. She is a fantastic illustrator, and this really kind of shows off both her illustration and her comics. She's also a great caricaturist, so she's interacting with people along the way, and she's doing this stuff not quite stream of consciousness, because she's doing it as she goes along and stops at nights, and sometimes for a couple of days if she's recovering after a few days of biking or hard conditions of biking. But it's beautiful artwork. She was posting this on her Instagram at the time, so you could kind of follow along her journey live. And it's just the people that she encounters, the landscape that she bikes through, her ruminations on this quest to bike across the United States, probably 2,000 miles maybe, the ride that she's attempting to make. And it's kind of like a living diary, a live diary while she's on that journey. And there are a lot of ups and downs on that journey. If you've done any kind of endurance activity, super long hikes, marathon running, anything of that sort, you kind of know the ups and downs that go with such a thing. And Eleanor chronicles that stuff in absolutely breathtaking, beautiful illustrations and a very honest style. Highly recommend this for anybody who's looking for something different and looking for some adventure in their reading. So go visit your local comic book shop, dig into the stacks there, and find your own treasures like I've pulled out here at Third Eye Comics.